This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network. Well, greetings everyone. It's Christopher McClellan from the Whole Care Network, and one of the great pleasures and honors I have at the Whole Care Network is to introduce new podcasters to the Whole Care Network. But this is kind of I think, MaryAnne, I'm going to get in a little trouble because this is a little bit more special than some of the other folks. Well, I will be in trouble now, but because we've known each other for so long, and now you're joining the network, and I can't be more happy. Welcome, MaryAnne Sterling.
Oh, thank you, Chris. I'm excited to be here and exciting to have a new podcast on the Whole Care Network.
Us versus them. Goodness, it sounds ominous. It sounds exciting. It sounds informative. But tell us, how did you come up with us versus them?
No, this is my phrase for it is intentionally provocative.
Intentionally provocative. Oh, goodness. Tell more.
I've been an advocate in the Alzheimer space for 25 years, having had multiple parents with dementia. It has been a long journey for me, but along the way, I've met some amazing people, and I want to give them the opportunity to tell their stories on my podcast, like how they confronted difficult situations while dealing with our healthcare system. Learn important lessons from them. And I want our listeners and myself to become informed advocates for change. I want to talk about tough topics that don't get enough attention.
Taboo topics is what I've heard.
Well, the rumor is true. Some of them are taboo topics. Things like gender bias in healthcare, chronic pain, caregiver burnout, and taking healthcare back from corporate interest. Yes.
That is going to be an exciting one, taking healthcare back from corporate interest. But the other one, the gender bias. We're in a time right now where gender seems to be kind of the buzzword for all the wrong reasons. But this isn't something new for healthcare.
No, it's not. This has been a problem for a long time, since the beginning of medicine and healthcare. We know it. I am very lucky to have the woman who wrote the book on this, Maya Dusenberry, joining me for my very first podcast. Her book is called Doing Harm. And if you have not read Maya's book, run, don't walk to get your copy today, because you will learn a lot on this topic. It's a very, very frank discussion. We're also joined by my good friend, Julie Stam, who lives with multiple sclerosis, and she has her own experience on gender bias to share with us. So a very, very, very provocative episode for sure. And the goal really is to give these topics more light and look at them through a different lens than we have up until now. Changing the healthcare system to do better.
Yeah, and the way we change the healthcare system is by sharing our stories, sharing our experiences, those one-on-one. Is confrontations, is that word okay to use?
It's okay to use, Chris. We can use that word. We need to learn from people with lived experience. And I think the more that our stories are told, the more open, honest, and provocative discussion we have about our lived experience and our experiences interacting with the healthcare and social services systems, the more likely we are to bring about positive change.
Because, on the Whole Care Network, it's through story sharing where diversity meets the road to collaborate on a common cause. And we're all about supporting caregivers before, during, and after caregiving ends. And you mentioned the word earlier, and I just kind of, when I think about you and I think about your tremendous work and your career, I think of the word advocacy. You are a true advocate.
Advocacy is sort of my therapy. My situation was really tough. Having multiple parents with dementia, there's no sugarcoating that. And my personal therapy was in becoming an advocate, not only for my parents, but for other people and other caregivers in particular. So I have spent the past 25 years looking at advocacy really through a multi-pronged approach. One prong being speaking to our elected officials, spending time on Capitol Hill, talking about topics that are important to Alzheimer's families and to family caregivers like myself. I also serve on an endless string of boards, committees, working groups for organizations that are focused on transforming healthcare. So advocacy takes on a much different look and feel when you think about it more broadly. It's not just about speaking to our elected officials about policy. Yes, that's one piece of it. But the other pieces of the puzzle are wrapped around, for instance, getting caregivers like myself and others on boards of both for-profit and nonprofit organizations, getting us onto committees and working groups that are whose goal is to transform healthcare as we know it into something that's more patient and caregiver centric. And we'll address some of these topics as well, because advocacy is part and parcel to who I am. And certainly my guests exemplify what it is to be an advocate.
You exemplify what it means to be an advocate.
Well, thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. There's a certain responsibility and a certain urgency that comes to those of us who have been in these tough caregiving situations. And I feel like it's a personal mission of mine to make sure that this, Alzheimer's disease is going to happen to other people and other families, but it does not have to be as challenging as it was for me. We can make the experience of caregivers better. We just have to work harder to do it.
And that's what you're going to be doing through us versus them. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention a little secret. That's probably not a secret anymore, but you have been accepted as a graduate student.
I have. This is a secret no more. I've just started at George Washington University working on my master's in public health. This is what I gave up to care for my parents. And I'm very, very lucky that all these years later, I'm able to right the ship and go back and accomplish something that I always wanted to do. So I'm excited. I'm terrified, but this is the next chapter for me, and I couldn't be happier.
We couldn't be happier to have you a part of the Whole Care Network. And for all of our listeners out there, please hit that subscribe button wherever you listen to your podcast, and be sure to visit the Us versus Them Patients and Caregivers Confront Healthcare page on the Whole Care Network. Well, you'll see just a whole bunch of wonderful information about MaryAnne, her guest. And do you want to kind of tease the listeners about some of your upcoming guests that you've got planned and recorded already?
I have some phenomenal episodes that I've already recorded. Can't wait for our listeners to tune in. First and foremost, we're going to start off with gender bias in healthcare. We're going to move on to topics like mental health. And for the mental health episode, I have to tell you, I have two amazing guests. They are both women around the age of 60 who have adult children with severe mental health issues.
Their stories, so important.
Their stories are just going to blow you away. So personal. They're so tough to listen to. You will walk away feeling like you know more about this topic and you can better support people that you know who may be struggling with mental health issues themselves or have children struggling with mental health issues. I just recorded an episode I'll never forget on frozen shoulder.
Frozen shoulder. I see, and I did not know anything about this calamity until you mentioned it. And there's probably thousands upon thousands of people who have had this and probably haven't found a resource to talk to about and you're going to do it. See, it's another part of your advocacy so that you're so committed to. So thank you.
Well, this is a very personal topic for me. I had frozen shoulder for 2.5 years. I lost the use of my right arm, which was my dominant arm, during that time. And I have joined 2 of my fellow 50-something women on this podcast to do a frozen shoulder throwdown. So if you are a perimenopausal or menopausal woman, you really want to tune in and listen to this because this may impact you. If you are someone who supports and loves a woman who's in her 40s, 50s, and beyond, you want to tune in too because you want to understand what this condition is. I'm excited about that. It's absolute throwdown on this topic. So we have some exciting episodes.
We got some exciting episodes coming up, and your first episode will be dropping soon. So for all of our listeners out there, be sure to hit the subscribe button wherever you listen to your podcast. And MaryAnne, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Chris.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time.